Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat here. We have quite a full room today of folks, so very excited to get into this topic here. Awesome. We have quite a full agenda today, so let's get into our webinar. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our webinar topic, Lessons from the Street, Tackling Downtown Blight. My name is Kristen Lopez. I am the Senior Director of Programs here at Connecticut Main Street Center. And today, like I said, it's a super popular one, so I'm very excited to bring on our guest speakers in just a few moments. But before I do that, just have a few words. For those of you who are not familiar with us at Connecticut Main Street Center, we are a statewide nonprofit that works in all types and sizes of downtowns across the state. And we work with them to help establish and maintain vibrant main streets. And we do that primarily in helping communities improve their management capacity and also implementing best practices. And we offer a variety of field services, education training, events, advocacy, work, and a lot of other special projects and services, all in service to reaching our mission. And we invite you to join our 80 plus communities around the state committed to improving their Main Street by becoming a Connecticut Main Street Center member. As a member, you receive exclusive help and resources to help you reach your downtown goals. So if you're interested in becoming a member, please reach out to us. We are more than welcome to invite you in. Today's webinar is brought to you by Liberty Bank Foundation. We are very grateful for their support today. And our AICP certification maintenance provider is IMEG. If you are attending today's webinar for continuing credit, you must complete the evaluation form at the end of this webinar. And with that, I am very excited to introduce our guest speakers today. We have Francisco Gomez, a senior urban planner of IMEG, formerly FHI Studios, and Michael Perez, the director of Blight remediation at the City of Hartford. And with that, they both have separate presentations. And up first is Francisco. So Francisco, I'll stop sharing and you can share your screen.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Okay, well, thanks everyone. Again, Francisco Gomes with IMEG, and IMEG, formerly known as FHI Studio, is a Hartford-based firm, although IMEG, our team is out of Hartford, but IMEG is a much larger firm with offices across the country. But most of my work in FHI Studio's previous work has been with communities in Connecticut, and Blight is a component of that. So what I'd like to do is provide a very high-level overview of what Blight is and how it's regulated and how it interfaces with other types of regulations across municipalities. So we'll start with the definition of it. We'll talk about Blight authority and where that comes from and the extent of that authority. Blight enforcement in relationship with zoning, building code, public health enforcement, and how it fits into that spectrum of regulation. And then some other options that we have beyond blight enforcement, such as business improvement districts and facade programs, which can also help to ensure that main streets and downtowns remain vibrant places. So I'd like to start with blight, and it's important to note that there's no authoritative definition of blight in either the Connecticut General Statutes or the federal regulations. So we have to look to agency regulations and even the dictionary. And according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, blight is a deteriorated condition. It's very broad. The Housing Urban Development, though, HUD, defines a structure as blighted when it exhibits objectively determinable signs of deterioration sufficient to constitute a threat to human health, safety, and public welfare. And those last three items, health, safety, and public welfare, are common threads to the basis of zoning regulations, public health code, building code, which is why I want to talk about all four of these in our discussion today. So blight is something, it's I know it when I see it, and that's a quote from Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart, and it was actually with respect to a different issue with respect to the definition of pornography. That's a pretty famous case and a pretty famous quote as well. And I think blight definitely falls into this category. You know it when you see it. You just get a feeling that like an area or a place or a property is blighted. And it can be sometimes hard to explain why that is other than the conditions are deteriorated. So when we consider blight on main streets in our town centers, there's a lot of components to this. It's not only is it individual properties, storefronts, facades, the public realm. It's really a composite of these things. So when we look at this image, is this blight? Well, yeah, maybe. There's clearly some boarded up storefronts. The facades aren't in great condition, yet there's uh, some shops that are active and others that may or may not be active, and conditions look pretty clean and maintained otherwise. And then when we look at the same image, just a little different, it's this is now leaning a little more towards blight, right? The sidewalk is in kind of poor condition. There are weeds growing. There's a little bit of litter on the ground, that sort of thing. And then if we go a step further with the sidewalks in poor condition, lots of litter, the storefronts having the same kind of feeling of vacancy and dereliction, it becomes very clearly, it jumps out at us as blight. And when we look at blight through this perspective, we begin to understand that blight extends beyond just a property owner and an individual property. Blight is really the result of neglect of the environment as a whole. So in this image, we see neglect of individual properties, but we also see neglect on the basis of whoever's responsible for this area, and that would be the municipality principally. The sidewalks haven't been maintained. The litter hasn't been collected. There are no trash cans visible to put the litter into. There's clearly hasn't been enforcement as to basic maintenance requirements. And so blight is really everyone turning their back on the environment. And that's what we see in this picture. And when you're in this area, because of its appearance, you'd probably feel uncomfortable. So blight enforcement is one of many tools that municipal government has in managing our built environment. And those other tools, and these are a few of many. They extend beyond this, of course, public safety and many other mechanisms. Zoning, building code, public health regulation, blight enforcement, all of these powers are conveyed through the Connecticut general statutes. They've been given to communities by the legislature, and so we can refer to the Connecticut general statutes in understanding the extent of these powers and how these need to be administered. So with zoning regulations, and this is most of the work that I do as a planner is through zoning regulation, although my work interfaces with all those other types of regulations. So the image from the right, Hartford's zoning regulations, we're on the team that really reinvented these regulations about 10 years ago. And they're very concerned with and oriented towards the pedestrian environment, facades of buildings, and how it relates to urban form. But zoning regulations as a whole regulate what is allowed, where it's allowed, how big it can be, the density of development, et cetera. And those are typically enforced on a day-to-day basis by a zoning enforcement officer. Building code concerns itself more with construction improvements to buildings and structures and new construction, including structural, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, ADA requirements, et cetera. And we've got state building code and international building code that controls all of that. And this is enforced by building official or a fire marshal. And fire code regulations are part of building code. They're a subset, and they're a substantial portion of that. And so this crosses over a lot of times when we see blight because there are often building code issues surrounding blighted properties. Public health regulation. It regulates food safety, waste disposal, drinking water, and air quality. And it's enforced by a public health officer or director of health. And public health departments license food vendors and food trucks on our streets, restaurants. They get involved with sanitation, any issues surrounding pests and vermin. And all of these things are very relevant to our main streets and downtown environments. And then we have blight enforcement, of course, which is what we're here to talk about today. And like Michael here, blight is enforced by blight enforcement officer, and that's a delegated position. In some communities, it may be the zoning enforcement officer or a building code officer or some other person that's been designated with that authority, or in Michael's case, a full-time blight enforcement officer. And blight regulates, and Michael's going to get into this in far more detail. Blight regulates exterior building maintenance, yard and site conditions, public health and safety standards, visual and neighborhood impacts, and any issues surrounding occupancy and security. And there are blight programs across the state. The flyer top, some communications material from Bridgeport, the bottom, promotional content from City Waterbury as well. So when we look to the Connecticut General Statutes regarding what blight is, how you can enforce it, and to what extent that you can enforce it. And that comes from a few different sections of statute. I'm not going to read out all the letters and numbers there, but it's there for your reference. So the statutes give municipalities the authority to make and enforce regulations. And that is in the form of a blight ordinance, which is separate from a zoning ordinance or zoning regulations. It's outside of them. It's a municipal ordinance. It's passed by your legislative body, whether it be city council, RTM, or board of selectmen, whatever it may be. It gives the city and its agent, its blight enforcement officer, a right to enter a property to inspect conditions. And that's not necessarily inside a building, but the property as a whole, to walk around the property and inspect conditions. There are civil penalties that can be assessed, and those penalties have been changed by statute. I'll get into that in a minute. In 2023, they were increased, but they can be fairly high, and those penalties can accrue per violation or on a day-to-day basis. Further, those penalties eventually can result in a lien on a property, so municipalities can place a lien, which is an interest in ownership on a property, which can eventually result in a foreclosure on the tax lien or a taking of the property. So unaddressed blight issues can be substantially impactful to a property owner and can enable communities that have resources necessary to take properties in order to address those blight issues, or to actually perform corrective measures and mitigations themselves, and to then place a lien for the cost of those services against the property. As I mentioned, Connecticut Public Act 2333, which became effective in October of 2023, expanded blight authority. Most of blight authority was oriented around residential properties, expanded that to commercial properties, increased the penalties of up to $1,000 per day for repeat violations. It clarified how repeat violators were to be, how action is to be enforced against repeat violators. It strengthened the lien and violation collection mechanisms. and provided greater flexibility in the drafting of ordinances so you could have more tailored regulations for your community and specific to your program. So blight is only as effective as the larger ecosystem, and blight enforcement, that is only as effective as the larger ecosystem in which it exists. And this quote from Helen Keller, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. And that certainly, I believe, holds true of things that we try to accomplish within our communities and through municipal government. And so coordinated responses are most effective when we coordinate all those different departments and agencies in a coordinated response to address issues surrounding blighted property and quality of life issues and economic development challenges in our main streets and downtown. In many communities in Connecticut, including Hartford, New Haven, where we've done quite a bit of work, and West Haven as well, have larger initiatives of which blight is a component. In New Haven, it's a Livable City initiative. West Haven, not long ago, launched a blight enforcement task force that, as you can see from the picture, brings together a lot of different staff and departments across departments to combat the issue of blight. And in addition to that, what it can assist in all of this is something like a 311 program that Waterbury has one and Hartford has one, where there's one number to dial for any issue surrounding blight or really any municipal issue. But there's one point of contact for residents, and that allows for unified tracking of the complaints, nuisances, and issues, and allows for a unified response as well. In addition to blight enforcement and everything I just discussed, there are other options for supporting vibrant downtowns and main streets. And I'll just go over a couple because our time is limited, but these are the two that I think are most relevant to our concerns and the concerns of the Connecticut Main Street Center in supporting vibrant main streets. And that would be business improvement districts, and I think most of you are familiar with what those are, and facade programs, which can be a component of a business improvement district, but can also be independent of one. As I said earlier, right, all of this authority is really given to us through statute. So business improvement districts are authorized through Connecticut General Statute, Section 7339, and they are created by municipal ordinance. They are supported through a special assessment on properties in the district, basically a tax on those properties. Typically, it requires that a certain percentage of property owners vote to form a district or join a district. And it's focused on adding an extra level of service in those areas. The image at the right is one from downtown Hartford, and we see these folks out taking fantastic care of the environment in front of our office in downtown every day. These bids typically will focus on streetscape maintenance and beautification, marketing, branding, and events, business recruitment and retention, public safety and ambassador programs, capital improvements, placemaking initiatives. They can be very broad in their scope. And then the facade program, it's something that Hartford for decades has had a very successful facade program. I don't believe it's currently accepting applications, but many other communities across Connecticut, including East Hartford, which these images are from, have very successul facade programs. So a facade program, it can be managed directly by a municipality, by a redevelopment agency, or by a bid, and it provides matching grants for facade improvements. And so that's the face of the building that's typically seen by the public from the street or public sidewalk. And that includes signage, building materials face, new glazing and doors and storefront, and any other treatments needed to enhance the quality of the property. One of the benefits of these is as a property is improved, it's required to get up to date with any zoning or design guidelines that are applicable to that property, whether it be village district design guidelines, historic standards, or any design guidelines through the zoning. So facade programs can be a really valuable tool. And it, requires both the owner and the city have a stake. They're both making a joint investment, and so it's a win-win for the community. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to hand it over to Michael, and I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Francisco. That was so great. Please put in questions in the Q&A function or in the chat. We will have time to get to them at the end. I already know I have a bunch of questions that I'm waiting to ask. So, Michael, I'll hand it over to you to share your screen and hear what you're doing in Hartford. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
It's up. We see it.
All right. I just have a pop-up on my main screen.
Oh,
I'm trying to get rid of it. All right. So anyways, what was so my name is Michael Perez. I'm the director of blight remediation for the city of Hartford. Thank you, Ani and Kristen for the invite. Thank you, Francisco, for sort of that awesome first presentation. And Francisco did a great job of sort of uh, listing all of the sort of tools that are at municipalities' disposal for dealing with these, quote unquote, blight issues, which are really anything having to do with quality of life or anything that looks unkempt can, somehow be grouped under the label blight. Um, one of so the municipality or I'm sorry, the state gives very broad powers and a lot of tools to municipalities. It doesn't dictate to us though how we should employ them and how we should organize our departments and divisions in order to sort of support these tasks and carry out these powers. So a lot of different municipalities will set up their paradigms of enforcement in different ways to fit their sort of manpower and their sort of bureaucratic structure. But the legislature does give, when it comes to blight enforcement, does give the onus to the municipality to create its own blight ordinance. If you don't have a blight ordinance that's based off of the enabling legislation that the legislature gives us, you basically have to enact one through your legislative body. And the legislature allows municipalities to be very broad in determining what constitutes a blight violation. It gives us the power to define what blight is. So there's enormous latitude that we get in defining and what each violation is. We have about 27 separate violations in our anti-blight and property maintenance ordinance. Um, there are some things that it does mandate. It does mandate that there are some pretty strict procedures in place, like the right to appeal, that owners have to be served legally. And the way that we've interpreted that is, we've got to send certified mail, return green card, in order to effectuate service. We first issue a notice of violation in order to correct, sort of indicating what the issues are. And so that's got to be sent out certified mail. We also try to pull out all the stops and send to as many contacts that we can find for the owner. So if there's two addresses on the Secretary of State registration for the entity that owns the property, my preference is to send to both of those addresses. If I have two or three emails, I'm going to send to two or three emails and put that right up top on the order that I send. We also post all of our orders on property and take date stamp photos. So if they don't get the mailing and they don't open their email, if they visit their property like they should, then they would have gotten notice. So it's not always easy for certified green card mailings to stick. And so we have written into our code a mechanism whereby if we sent out certified mailing and they came back designated as undeliverable by the United States Post Office, then that's good enough for us in terms of satisfying our notice requirement. Um, so if we get a signed green card back or we get an unsigned one, we know that we've also done whatever else we could by attempting to deliver the order by email and by posting on the property. Um, that gets us to the next step of our enforcement, which is then the issuance of a citation if if the um if the owner is still non-compliant. And in the middle of that step, after the owner gets their first order under our ordinance, they have the ability to submit a request for stay. They can submit something in writing stating, listen, on these two violations, I'm going to need more time than just 10 days. And we require them to lay out how they're going to remediate that violation and what the time frame is going to be. And then we'll take a look at the information that they give us and decide whether or not to give an extension of time. Um, and so often our extensions of time, if one is asked for, are sort of truncated based on less time for the more severest uh, violations. Usually we give a very short amount of time for removing garbage and debris or taking care of overgrown vegetation. Other work that requires permits, where we allow a little more leeway. Um, Before we get to that formal enforcement, I forgot to mention we do try informal outreach. Our initial goal is just to get a hold of this owner, have a conversation with them. What's your plans for this property? Where did things go wrong? Can we help you, point you in a direction of assistance that might help you to, um, y- you know, uh, get the property over the finish line? We want to get the owner and know what his motivations are. If it's an owner that owns 20 properties and they're all sort of works in progress and none of them are finished, I might say, have you thought about selling off some of your portfolio so that you can repair the other ones and then start earning income off of them? We deal with a lot of owners that have sort of unrealistic or irrational sort of expectations about what their capability is of handling large portfolios are. And so, we do have that conversation sometimes at that informal stage. Like, listen, we're not telling you what to do with your property, but if you have too many and you can't afford to take care of them all and you're facing the threat of fines, why not liquidate some of that and use what capital you can generate to bring the other properties to constructive use. So at least you're making money off of them. Um, Sometimes we get no response from an owner or a response, and they're still non-compliant. And so in certain cases like that, and I'll just also take a step back and say that we are sort of in a triage mode here at the city where we're focusing on blighted vacant properties first. Properties that have significant issues that are occupied, uh, uh, um, we will issue orders on, but it's far less. There are far less of those in number than the cases that we have open on vacant blighted properties. And I'll just talk about vacancy for a minute. Vacancy by itself is not necessarily a bad thing if you have a property that's being well maintained, if you got a security guard sitting in front of it every day, or somebody's coming to clean it every morning. But generally, that's not the case. And so the problem with vacant properties, especially in inner cities, is that inner cities that have a lot of foot traffic, a lot of homeless population, um, it- these properties tend to become magnets for illegal activity, trespassing, vandalism, people trying to break in to do all sorts of things, including squat there. As the property starts to slide downhill, as the vegetation gets overgrown, as litter starts to fill up in that lot, it starts to be more inviting to people that are looking for an area that they can hide and do no good. Um, so that's the seriousness, for me about vacant properties that aren't being supervised as aggressively as they should be. That's inevitably what starts to happen to those properties. people will attempt to start getting in. People will get in, looking to sleep there in the wintertime, looking to start fires to cook, or small fires to stay warm. I've been through vacant buildings and I've found coffee pots filled with burning cinder, so that if somebody needs to light up a oil lamp or something inside this vacant, 10-story building with all the power off, that's what they use. And so there's a lot of dangerous situations that can occur once you have a vacant building and you're not keeping an eye on it on a daily basis. There's some vacant buildings in Hartford where we've issued owners to hire on-site security, because the other measures they had in place to supervise the property was proven insufficient to keep out the criminal activity, and keep the property safe and secure. Um, Jumping back a little bit to some of the tools that Francisco mentioned, the building code is a very powerful tool. I have three blight inspectors. They're also building officials. So they issue orders under the Connecticut State Building Code as well as under the city's blight ordinance. Um, One of the interesting things that they do is, we're constantly checking on the vacant buildings. And an unsecured vacant structure under the Connecticut Building Code is deemed to be an unsafe structure. That has to be, and an order to that effect has to be sent to the owner under the state building code. And if the owner does not within some reasonable period of time, generally, a matter of hours or half a day, um, come and secure that opening, so that people can't just walk in off the street into a vacant building, then the city has to step in. We'll step in and do it ourselves. And so one of the things that we do based upon building orders issued by our blight inspectors is we do board ups and emergency securing of vacant buildings. We don't want kids wandering into these buildings that are dilapidated and with hazards on the interior. Um, we don't want people going into these buildings and engaging in illegal activity or vandalizing the building so that to the point where it starts to lose value and the next owner gets stuck with a building that is did once have the opportunity to be profitable as a rehab, but now is too far gone. So that's one of the things that we aggressively look to protect against, and that's one of the dangers of vacancy, is that if they're not being properly babysat, they will fall into disrepair. They will gather all that trash and debris, graffiti, and that's just a target sign on the building. Trespassers, people looking to engage in vandalism, they're gonna, if they're walking down a block, they're gonna pick the worst looking building to go and have fun and do what it is that they're looking to do, because that's the building that's less likely to sort of have an owner show up and kick them out or call the police. So vacancy and blight going together is our main priority. And we also, because I also want to say this, because we only have three inspectors and I work in a large bureaucracy. um you know Communication and synergy with other officials in the city of Hartford I mean, indispensable. It's a force multiplier. If I can pick up the phone and talk to any of the nuisance inspectors that work for our health department, we can better sort of tag team issues that are popping up in a specific neighborhood. If it's, whether it's overgrown grass or, the weather has just turned and nobody's cut their grass and, they're jammed up with their two inspectors. I can have one or two of my inspectors help issue their orders. And so we've worked things out so that, when we're jammed up, they'll help us with stuff that they have jurisdiction over. And and when they're jammed up, we'll do the same for them. There's a lot of overlapping jurisdiction in a lot of these codes. But usually in your bureaucracy, you should have sort of, appoint a department as who has sort of primary jurisdiction over a certain condition. Um, so our building inspectors, our nuisance inspectors, our fire marshals, our zoning enforcement officers, our police officers, they all work directly and very closely with our blight team. We don't want a situation where we're working in silos, just focusing on what we believe our mission is, and we're sort of have mental blinders on and are not looking to sort of know what our sister agencies that are working on relatively similar quality of life stuff is doing. It's more like the communication and the ability to work together and problem solve across departments is extremely important, and it takes time to build those relationships without any ego coming in the way. We're public servants, and I think there's a good group of people here that sort of share that same perspective. And there's not a lot of fighting over turf. I let me clean up those dirty organic bags of trash, and you go do something else. There isn't a whole lot of that. We're all rushing to jump on the same thing sometimes, and it makes all of our job a lot easier. It makes the city look a lot cleaner when there's able to be collaboration of that type, especially in a city of our size. Uh, so for example, we use our health department orders to do our clean and lean work, where we issue orders to clean up garbage and debris, remove illegal dumping, remove any overgrown vegetation, especially along sort of property lines, where on vacant properties, so that there's a clean line of sight. Um, if those orders aren't complied with, we have a DPW cleanup crew go and remediate the issue when it comes to overgrown vegetation and garbage and debris. And then we use a Connecticut General Statute 12-169B, which allows the city to attach expenses that it incurs in making a property safe or sanitary. Or secure. It enables municipalities to certify those expenses to the tax rolls. So there's a mechanism for you to go and clean up a property following a legally issued order, and then get the property cleaned up, get it paid for, and then bill the owner by throwing that amount onto their property taxes. There's also a second alternative where you can record a paper lien. That's 49-73B is a statute that allows for that. There are some procedural layers that make that a little bit onerous. You have to send by yeah, you have to have it served by a marshal or some other indifferent person, and you've got to simultaneously serve a copy on all lien holders of record. 12-169B doesn't have that. But we do both. We file paper liens, and we also issue to taxes. You can do one or the other, but we do both in different situations. And also public directors of health have wide-ranging powers to declare certain deleterious conditions in the city as public nuisances. We've tried to do that around snow, unshoveled snow in the wintertime on walkways, and things like that. But the legislature gives the director of health wide powers in defining what a nuisance is and giving them the ability to order it to be abated. And then if it's not abated, the municipality can go on and abate it itself. So the awesome thing about blight liens is they have this super priority. Really, the only thing that trumps them is property taxes. So this is very scary for some mortgage companies. We like to let lien holders know when we are issuing formal orders on a property. Your blight liens in Connecticut will foreclose out any mortgage, except a Fannie Mae or a Freddie Mac mortgage, because there's some arcane federal statute that says that municipalities can't initiate any legal action with regards to fines that may trump or invalidate attempt to invalidate a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac lending instrument. Um, so nevertheless, you have the ability to amass a large fine on a property, and if you need to take it, you're going to foreclose out everything else that's on there, whatever mortgages are, regardless of when those mortgages were recorded. Your blight lien is going to take priority over them. The only thing it's not going to take priority over is tax liens. Um, and like Francisco said, there's been recent statutory changes to the amount of blight fines that you can issue on commercial properties. It is 10 cents per square foot of the building per violation per day. That can add up very quickly. This building on the bottom of this photo, this wall building, it says on the top. I think it goes very far in the back. It's actually a large building. We just foreclosed on that, and the main instrument that we used to foreclose was a $1.2 million blight lien, and we accumulated that blight lien at that 10 cents per square foot per violation per day method. So it is useful. We foreclosed on a lot of properties. We've survived judicial scrutiny. We've survived appeals. Um, what enables us what I think what has enabled us to be successful in doing that is uh, having having a stringent procedure in place and following it every single time. So like I said, we are issuing notices, we're posting at the property, we're sending to emails, we're sending to all the addresses we can find. If we have to move to the next step, we're issuing a citation. We're recording a copy of that citation on the land records. We had already given the owner a chance to request a stay and seek more time. If that hasn't happened within 10 days of when we served the original notice, we move to that citation stage. The important layer of procedure there is you have to have, as it's laid out in statute 7-152C, is have an appeal procedure. I like when owners appeal because they get called to the carpet in front of a hearing officer, and we get to say, here's why we issued this citation. Here's what your property looked like 3 months ago. Here's what it looked like a month ago, and here's what it still looks like now. And that's why we're asking for this huge fine. But those hearings can very often lead to some settlement agreements while keeping the hearing matter unclosed but continued. And sometimes you can get movement on an owner simply by threatening to fine them if they've appealed and showed up to a hearing. If there is no appeal, we still send a packet with all of our evidence to an independent hearing officer and have that independent hearing officer issue that fine. And if they have not appealed, um, if they have not taken the exercise the right to administratively appeal the citation when it's issued, they have 10 days to do that from when they receive it. They can't then appeal the hearing officer's decision. They didn't exhaust their administrative remedies. And so that is a cause for having any type of appeal of the final fine assessment appealed. They're they cannot appeal at that point if they didn't first ask for an appeal at the administrative level. So
Michael?
yep, sorry.
Sorry, no, I just want to make sure that we have enough time for
Sure.
questions here
Okay.
because we got a lot coming in. Uh, Michael, this is great, and hearing what Hartford's doing. And you guys will get these slides. There's a lot of great information on here. Um, So let's get into questions because we have a bunch here. Let's get through. Okay, so we'll just take this one. Francisco, what is the average size of money for facade improvement grants? Any quick comment on that?
Yeah, they can be really tiny. It could be, and by tiny, I mean, $20,000 up to $100,000. That's a pretty common range. It really depends on the resources available in the municipality, how much they're willing to match, and how much a property owner is willing to invest. But my barber, for instance, who owns a couple of properties on Farmington Avenue across from the wall building that Michael just showed. And so whenever I get my hair cut there, I'm staring at that building. And Michael, I'm so glad to hear that the city has taken that. He did a facade program about 10 years ago, and he invested, the total investment is probably about $50,000 in an Art Deco building that restored it back to its original. It peeled off a whole skin that was put on it that hid all the Art Deco features and did a magnificent job restoring it. And that was probably a good $50,000 investment in total.
And Connecticut Main Street, we actually just published a facade improvement a grant program resource guidebook. So that is available to our members here. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to us and we'll make sure you get a copy of that. Thank you. Mike, how well do Hartford's NRZs collaborate with your blight remedial efforts?
Uh, to different extents. There's a couple of NRZs that we meet with on a monthly basis and go over properties in their neighborhood that are that they flagged as priorities. And we also go over all the vacant properties in their neighborhood. So some of the NRZs are more active than the others. But there are three NRZs that we do meet with regularly. The others we communicate with, but it's more of us responding when they have requests. Our department, Development Services, does send a representative to every NRZ meeting, a representative from our planning department as on behalf of our department. But yeah, I mean, it's key to collaborate with the NRZs. We want to know what what they're seeing in the neighborhood that presents problems. Um, uh, uh, you know, because like I said, I have a limited number of inspectors. They have to spend time in the office. They're not on the street with their eyes sort of looking everywhere, 24 hours a day. So the people in the community that sort of live there and know what's going on have the most valuable information
Mhm.
about what's been going on the property. Sometimes I'll see a property, I'll realize it's in bad condition, but I won't realize the extent of threatening behavior that's been going on there, or criminal activity, or loitering, until I speak to somebody that lives nearby it. So
Yeah.
input and collaborating with the NRZs is integral.
Yeah, that's great. And neighborhood revitalization zones, NRZs, I believe. Collaboration is the name of the game here that both of you guys have reiterated. Um, if a property owner fences in the area around a residential house that is caving in but has not demolished or cleaned up the property, what would be the best course to address the matter that will expedite the demolition remediation, building or health, or follow the blight enforcement notice procedure? Okay, real quick on this one.
I
Any,
can take a stab at that one if you want. You want something real
yeah,
quick because um,
yeah,
yeah, just call the city, call any of those departments, take pictures, send them in, and one of any agents representing the city or town will get things moving.
yeah. Question I would love to hear in the chat to all of you. Um, how many of you after this webinar are going to be looking up your current blight ordinances? Because it seems like that's the first step. You need to have that ordinance in place to really take any action. So I'd love to hear in the chat just where is everyone at with their blight ordinance? Do you know if you have one? How long was it been updated? We'll love to hear from everyone there. Okay, let's go back to the chat here. Um, Is it helpful to have building and fire make their determination first in terms of putting together your reasoning that a property is blighted?
Yeah, Michael, you want to take that one?
Yeah, yeah, sure. You know, I mean, yes and no. Because depending on the seriousness of it. I mean, if there's a fire at a property, building inspectors are going to show up if the fire department shows up. Um, you can issue orders under a blight ordinance and orders under the building code simultaneously. And we do that a lot. If there's a if there's a structural issue where the building is one part of the building is in in threat of collapsing, then you do want a building order. But chances are, if the building's got to that point, there's other blight issues, and it's not unhelpful to also issue blight orders to put that additional um, um, I think that's the time to let the owner know, okay, not only do you have this issue under the building code, you have this, damage structural element to your building, but this is not the only thing that you're going to need to fix to bring your property into
Mm-hmm.
compliance. Um, we depending on how on whether owners have permits in place, we may be a little bit more lenient if they get on it right away. But yeah, I mean, one of the reasons we have our blight inspectors all as certified building officials is because they can diagnose that stuff when they get there. And sometimes following inspections, they'll set up an inspection worksheet for a blight notice of violation, and they'll issue their own building order to the
Mm-hmm.
owner. So it can happen simultaneously. Violations of the building code, I believe, can also be referred to the state's attorney if there's non-compliance with an order issued under the building code. So there's that extra teeth there. Where you can get the state prosecutor involved to send a letter to the owner saying, "Hey, it's our understanding you haven't complied with this order. I'm giving you 7 days, or else I'm considering, sending you a summons." So that's another valuable tool if you really need to get heavy-handed. But to answer your question, you can do both simultaneously.
Just kind of reacting to some of the comments here from some of our smaller communities. Francisco, I'm just curious what your take is on these smaller communities that like are trying to pass blight ordinances. It's getting
Right.
rejected, and resources are really tight. Blight enforcement is a real problem. Just curious, kind of any advice or approach that you're thinking about for those smaller towns.
So a blight enforcement ordinance and enforcement program is more typical of a city or a larger community where it's a more substantial issue and there are greater resources to address it. As we look across Connecticut and other states as well that have small communities and rural communities, we have communities in Connecticut that don't have a town planner. So we have communities that have very limited resources. I don't think that should discourage them from considering adoption of a blight ordinance. It doesn't have to be a program as robust as the one that Michael's running in Hartford. It can be a very simple blight ordinance that can result in fines and establishes really simple and a fundamental level of maintenance that is required on properties. And I don't think it's beyond any community, regardless of their size, to do that. Almost all communities have a building inspector, and that building inspector can be the designated blight enforcement officer. So I don't think it's beyond the reach of even our smaller communities.
Mm, thank you. Thank you for that. How long can a building be boarded up before you can take blight action against them? Is 20 years too long?
I, I,
I'm happy to
yeah.
answer that.
Okay.
And Mike, I'm sure Michael has thoughts as well. By boarded up, I guess we're assuming that the property owner themselves boarded it up and it wasn't the city or town that boarded it up. As soon as a property is boarded up, and if that's a violation of the blight ordinance because of the
Mhm.
vacancy or the way in which the property is secured, that's immediately enforceable under a blight ordinance if it addresses that issue. And with that said, I'm sure Michael has thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. 20 years is too long in my estimation, but we have a provision written into our ordinance that it's not that it's a violation if a window remains boarded for more than a year. Um, we do require when owners do board ups that they paint the boards a similar color of the building that it's attached to. But even if we have to go in and do a board up because the owner neglected their duty to do so, we still we'll still count that a year later as a violation because it's not our sort of responsibility to go in and put in new windows for the owner. It's the owner's responsibility to do that. And the simple fact that we went in and on an emergency basis to protect the property by boarding it, we don't use that as something to preclude us from using that as a violation down the road. Um,
Excellent. Thank you. Just maybe a couple very quick ones here before we close up. This obviously can be like a 2 hour long conversation for sure. Does a blight enforcement officer need to have any certain certifications? I think that was an interesting one.
no. Um, uh, I think the statute refers that indicates that there's got to be a director of no, that's our code indicates that there's got to be a director of blight remediation. But there's no certifications associated with a blight inspector. You can have inspectors that just go around taking pictures of things that look, out of the ordinary or ugly or deleterious. Um, there's no special certification. I have a background. I have a legal background, and so they brought me in to help put this together. And to work with our other attorneys at our corporation counsel's office, and we used a lot of out of state consultants. We were also building a land bank at the same time, so there was a lot of expertise that was brought to bear on creating what we have now.
Mhm.
Around the same time that we created a land bank, so I was lucky to be a part of that.
And it sounds like it really goes back to the ordinances of how your town kind of codifies what blight is. And so if that person's trained up to be able to take note of that, it sounds like they could do the work.
Yeah, and especially with automated, tablets and stuff like that, and if you create a system where, they they have a dashboard that they can just work through and electronically create a report
Mhm.
that gets sent up the chain. It's a lot easier, and
Mhm.
with one or two guys, you can get to a lot
Yeah.
with the technology that's available.
One very last question here. Sorry, I'm not going to get to all of them, but um, where do the funds go when you're collecting, these fees, these violation fines? Where does that money end up?
So, money that's collected under as blight fines have to be deposited into a special blight fund. So the city has a special blight fund where if we collect any blight revenue, it goes back into that fund, and we use that fund for board ups, and, emergency work on property, and other stuff like that in furtherance
Mhm.
of more serious issues that under blight.
Could that be used to fund a facade improvement program?
We have used blight funds in the past to fund programs like that. As it's got to be sort of related to blight and housing blight, and so yeah, we our blight program used to have a housing restoration program is what we called it. And it was a facade loan program. One of the requirements was the same owner had to own the property 5 years later,
Mhm.
and not
Yeah,
have any other red flags like unpaid taxes.
right.
I also, I also wish I had enough money in my fund to give, similar loans to owners of occupied properties.
Hmm.
There's such a lot of the housing stock in Hartford is very old and it's becoming dilapidated. and it's tough for single family homeowners, some of them who are elderly,
That
to
maintain.
get other loans because the
Mhm.
underwriting processes are so onerous. There's a large subset of folks that don't qualify for conventional HUD assistance or HUD loans that need that need assistance. And so, I would, if I had all the money in the world, I would help with something like that as well.
Mhm.
And the properties that we do have to take and acquire, we can use that money to sort of clean them out, to put fences up, to block off driveways, and stuff like that.
Thank you.
But it's got to go to that specific fund.
Understood. Thank you so much, Francisco, Michael, for your time today, for all the great questions, participants. Just as we wrap up here, I know we're a couple minutes over. When you do exit this webinar, you will be prompted to fill out that evaluation form. So if you need a jump and you need that continuing credit, you'll be able to get that there. Just a couple upcoming events that we have. May 21st, we'll have our next webinar with Zero Empty Spaces. So kind of in a similar vein of activating vacancies. Zero Empty Spaces is a really interesting program that is using vacancies as a creative kind of economic opportunity. That will be really great. Our Spotlight on Main event next Thursday in Wallingford is sold out. Very excited about that. If you really, really want to come to the Spotlight event in Wallingford and see what Wallingford's doing, I'm sure we could squeeze you in. Just shoot us an email. Our State of Maine event, this is our second annual State of Maine event where we'll be looking at all of the stuff that we've been seeing and doing across the state. We'll have great panels, developer outlook, policy outlook, and also looking about systems thinking across our regions. It's going to be an excellent event that will be in Torrington on June 16th. Tickets are available. And lastly, Main Street Accelerator applications are open. Our next cohort is starting in September, which is a different timeline than we've had the last few years. So if you're interested, please email Ani. Her email address is on the screen here. And we look forward to talking to you about that. And thank you again to our awesome guest speakers, super knowledgeable, super generous with sharing all your expertise and advice. So thank you very much. And thank you to Liberty Bank Foundation for supporting today's webinar. And with that, have a great rest of your day, everyone. Take care.